I'm a sports agent right now. It's so easy to look at a player as a commodity. And if that commodity yields a return, you invest in it. And if it doesn't yield a return, you just toss it to the side. As someone who played the game, who coached, who worked in the front office, I have a different appreciation when I interact with my guys. I lived it. I know what they're going through. I know how important it is to hand someone your life's work and say, please manage it the proper way. That's how I approach every single one of my clients. You're handing me your life's work. You've been doing this since you were 4 or 5 years old. I owe it to you to give it that type of respect, that type of commitment, that type of hard work.
Then you are in Australia right now.
You're talking NBA basketball. You're talking great teams. You're talking great individual players.
Takes it off, and there's number 23, and of course Johnny goes nuts.
We're all getting goosebumps thinking about it now.
I just tried to go out there and play my game.
I have no idea what you're talking about, Adam. I don't like anybody. I'm not a people person.
Strand, you made the pass. Yes. Christian, can you catch the ball? Yes.
All the stars were aligned and all the muscles fired at the right time, and I was able to get off the ground and throw one down.
I was saving that as a surprise for you.
And now, introducing your host for In All Airness, Adam Ryan.
Welcome to episode 67. Thanks for joining me. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome Mitchell Butler to the show. He's a high school All-American who, as of this recording, is 6th all-time in total games played with the UCLA Bruins. He went undrafted, yet played for 8 years in the NBA. We discuss his incredible high school basketball prowess, the classic 1993 NCAA tournament game versus Chris Webber's Michigan Wolverines, and of course, his NBA days. Thanks to former podcast guest and friend of the show, Jim McIlvaine, we cover Mitchell's acting career, including Blue Chips and his links to Space Jam. Speaking of former guests of the show, we chat about Australian legend Andrew Gaze, who was teammates with Mitchell on the Washington Bullets back in 1994. Thanks very much, Mitchell, for making yourself available. It was a pleasure to speak with you. Stay up to date with my podcast by subscribing to my monthly email newsletter. You'll receive exclusive details on upcoming podcast episodes, future high-profile guests to appear on the show, and much more. Simply visit inallairness.com/news. Show notes for this episode, including links to the numerous topics covered, are at inallairness.com/67. Now, onto the show. My guest today was named a high school All-American in 1989 and played 4 years with UCLA. He went undrafted before playing 8 NBA seasons. Mitchell Butler, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Adam, for having me.
I appreciate this chance to chat with you today. I'm looking forward to talking about your career to date. Now, before we even get to your high school career, which you were a fantastic high school player, do you mind just talking about growing up as a kid, what sort of sports you were involved with and when you decided to focus more on basketball?
As a kid growing up, I have 2 older brothers, 5, 6 years older than me. My oldest brother was a really good American football player, and that was my first love, was American football. And I was actually probably a much better football player than I turned out to be in basketball.
Wow.
But, the sport was so physical, and as a young kid playing, Pop Warner football at, 11 and 12 years old, teams would really focused on me to try to get me out of the game. So, they were really physical and very strong with me. So I decided to move away from that sport and jump over to basketball. But I also did track and field, a little bit of volleyball. I was a very active kid. The one sport that I really didn't like was baseball. I just thought it was not enough action.
From what I understand, based on the research I've done for our chat today, from 1987 through 1989, you were named the Southern Section Small Schools Division Player of the Year, which is incredible. In 1988, you led your team to the Liberty League Division Championship, and you had some incredible stat lines. In this game, it was 47 points, 19 rebounds, 4 steals, and 2 blocks in Oakwood High School's 61-60 victory.
Yeah.
Can you just reflect on that outstanding high school career and some of those things that you achieved there, Mitchell?
Well, high school was really, for me, probably the most fun I had in basketball. It's innocent. There's not a lot of pressure. The idea is just to go out and to compete, have fun, and let the chips fall. I had a blast in high school, wonderful teammates. I had a female coach who was one of the first women to coach a boys' high school varsity basketball team in the United States. We just had a good time. I didn't take the game very seriously until probably going into my senior season when my coach pulled me aside and just told me, you're different than everybody else. And I would debate her and say, no, I'm not. I'm the same. And she was like, no, you're different. And that's when I started to understand that, basketball could be used as a vehicle to advance me in college and potentially on to the pros.
The coach that you referred to, her last name escapes me, but her first name is Roz, correct?
Roz Goldenberg. And we really didn't use last names at our school, so we just called her Roz, Coach Roz.
Oh, that's great. And what was it like to have her guiding your team through your high school career there? Because I think she was there for all of your seasons in high school.
She was very tough on me, especially, because she realized that, I had a gift. She was a lot harder on me at times than she was on my teammates. She was knowledgeable about the game. We won lots of games. We won a CIF championship. We advanced to the quarterfinals of state a couple of times. We won our league, all 4 years that I was on varsity. So, there was no difference between having a female coach and a male coach. She was very knowledgeable about the game. And like I said, she challenged me in ways that, allowed me to prepare for college and that next step.
Yeah, that's very important too. Now, I must add as well, in your 1988 quarterfinal game, I found out this last night, you scored a staggering 50 points out of your team's 55 in total when you had an 8-point win. You scored more than the opposition team. How do you even put a performance like that into perspective when you look back on it all these years later?
It was a surreal game, to say the least. I remember being interviewed by a reporter after that game, and he told me, do you realize that you outscored your opposition? I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, you had 50 points. I was so lost in the game. I was in a zone, and just everything was clicking and everything was going. It was a playoff game, and it was a big game, and my teammates, for whatever reason, they just didn't show up. They were a little nervous, a little afraid. I didn't want to lose the game, so, I just took it upon myself. But I think if you had watched the game, it wasn't like I just completely dominated the ball. The ball just found me in the right places, in the right areas where I was able to capitalize and score. And I honestly didn't think that I had that many points. And that was the stat line of the night, I guess.
It was quite remarkable because I came across the story last night while I was doing a bit of last-minute research to make sure I'd covered as much as I could, and I just couldn't believe it. So I had to do a double take when I read that you scored 50. It was fantastic. Now, in November of 1988, if I've got my timeline correct, that was the early signing period ahead of your senior year at high school, and you signed a letter of intent with UCLA. Mm-hmm. You were heavily recruited. What other schools were wanting you to sign on the dotted line?
We had Duke University, Arizona, Kansas, Cal, Stanford. Really all of the major D1 schools were very interested. And for me, it just came down to fit. Obviously staying home was, factored into the equation. And when it came down to it, it came down to Duke University and UCLA.
How was your interaction that you had with Coach K at Duke at the time? How did that go down, and what do you think ultimately decided you to stay in California and play for UCLA?
Incredible with Coach K. I mean, what's not to like about Duke basketball? The premier program in the country was actually my first choice. And as I started to go on more and more recruiting trips, they were nervous that they were going to lose me. And they had one scholarship left, and scholarship to Thomas Hill, because Thomas Hill applied a lot of pressure to them, saying that he would go somewhere else. So they didn't want to take a chance on losing us both. So, it would have been amazing playing for Coach K. I mean, who wouldn't want to play for a guy with a mind like his, the ability to push the right buttons to motivate you and to get the maximum out? That would have been amazing. But I wouldn't trade my UCLA experience for anything.
That's good to hear. Now, in 1989, you were named a high school All-American. What was it like to see your name in amongst the first, I think you're a third-team All-American?
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. Considering I played at a small school, my enrollment in my grade was, 60 kids. Total in my high school, 250. You're talking about being able to achieve something that millions of kids throughout the country are trying to achieve. And, you're one of 25, and I happen to be a third-team All-American, which basically placed me in the top 15 in the country. And, you're talking about guys like Shaquille O'Neal, Kenny Anderson, Allen Houston, Jimmy Jackson, Tracy Murray, James Robinson. These guys went on all to have great NBA careers. And to be mentioned with those guys in that class, it's a special fraternity.
Oh, for sure. And you're definitely among the best of the best. Now, as it currently stands, I believe you're 6th all-time in total games played at UCLA. You played all 4 seasons with the Bruins. It would be remiss of me not to mention this, but I don't know how good your memory is going to be. In the last warm-up game prior to your freshman season at UCLA, you played against my fellow countrymen, the Australian Boomers.
I do remember that.
You do?
Yes.
You defeated Australia 80-68 at Pauley Pavilion. What do you sort of recall from that game against the Aussies?
Didn't they have Andrew Gaze on that team?
Yes. Phil Smythe was the captain. He may have actually had 3 or 4 three-pointers in that game based on what I read, but Andrew Gaze, a future teammate of yours, I'll get to that shortly as well.
Yes, he was a future teammate of mine. And I do remember that game. Yes, it was a preseason game my freshman year.
Yep.
It was a bunch of fun. I don't remember very intricate details of that game, but I do remember playing the Australian Boomers.
Yeah, I had to mention it.
That's a good one.
Now, you played in the NCAA tournament in all 4 seasons with the Bruins. As a freshman, you made it to the Sweet 16 against Duke, who were the national finalists before they eventually lost to UNLV. What do you recall about that first trip to be a part of the March Madness there, Mitchell?
It was great. We ended up taking out Kansas, who was the number 1 seed in our region. It was a very great game. I remember I missed the shot that Tracy Murray, my teammate, rebounded and got fouled with about 4 or 3 seconds left. And then we were down 1, and he stepped to the line for 2 free throws. And the senior on our team, Trevor Wilson, walked up to Tracy while he was at the foul line, whispered something in his ear. Tracy laughed, smiled, cool, calmly, collected, just knocked down both free throws. They rushed the ball up, missed, and we win the game. And to this day, we still don't know what Trevor Wilson said in Tracy Murray's ear. They refused to tell us. So.
I was about to say, what was it that he said, but you still don't know.
We still don't know. It's 20 years later.
That's fantastic. I love that sort of stuff. Thanks for sharing that. Now, in your sophomore season, you started almost every game before your team was upset by Penn State in the first round of the tournament. I also read with interest that you considered possibly transferring away from UCLA after that second season. How close were you to actually leaving the Bruins?
I was very close. One of my other teammates, Zan Mason, who came in with me in my freshman year, who was one of the best players in Los Angeles, he transferred after that season and went to Loyola Marymount. And I was looking as well. I didn't feel like I was being utilized in the best way for me.
Mm-hmm.
It was tough, I knew I was much better than what I was showing, and I was being asked to play in positions that really weren't my natural positions because I was the most athletic player on the team. So it was tough. I was very close.
Right. Okay. Well, thanks again for sharing that. Now, moving forward to 1992, your junior season, UCLA made it to the Elite Eight before losing out to Calbert Cheaney and the Indiana Hoosiers. How did you respond to that heavy defeat to Indiana at that stage?
That one is still tough to swallow to this day.
Right.
Because we played them earlier in the season and we just annihilated them in the Tip-Off Classic in Massachusetts. Completely dominated their team. We had the better team. On that team, we had 9 active players and 1 redshirt player to go on and play in the NBA at some point in their careers.
Mm.
And we underachieved, and it wasn't even close, considering that we had beaten them by, 20 points earlier in the season.
As a senior, you were named the team captain, and you also enjoyed arguably probably your best season with the Bruins, almost 10 points a game, over 5 rebounds and 2 assists a contest as well. And in the process, you almost upset the famous Fab Five of Michigan in a classic second-round overtime game in the 1993 NCAA tournament. The Wolverines were led by Chris Webber and his 27 points. You played very well, 14 points on 6 of 9 shooting. What do you remember about that thrilling finish?
When I think about my senior season, we have some guys on that team who are really talented. And Tyus Edney, Ed O'Bannon, George Zedek, guys that would go on to win a national championship. Yeah, it was arguably the best game of the tournament that year. It was a heavyweight match. We came out guns blazing against them. I think Ed O'Bannon had 19 points in the first half. They go on a huge run in the second half, and then we come storming back to basically tie it and almost really had a chance to win it in regulation. Tyus Edney had been big for us, huge for us the whole year, probably won 6 or 7 games for us in the last minute or two with his heroics, and he steals the ball. And instead of shooting a little 15-foot pull-up shot, he tried to make a pass at O'Bannon. They steal it. Time expires. We go into overtime, and we lose to them in overtime. But it was a great game. We felt like if we had won that game, we'd have marched all the way to the Final Four because that bracket was completely open. It got busted open. I think either Baylor or Belmont, it was one of those schools upset another school, and it was kind of just wide open straight to the Final Four, which Michigan just coasted in.
Before we chatted today, I watched the last 10 minutes or so of the game and the overtime session last night. And as you said, Tyus had a steal and drove in towards the basket, and it could have been a possible win in regulation, but wasn't to be. So what a great game that was. What were you told about the likelihood of being picked in the 1993 draft, and what sort of possibilities you had to make it into the NBA?
I was told that I had no chance. 0.
Really?
And this was by the head of NBA scouting. I told my coach that.
Wow.
I knew inside of me that I had more ability than was shown at UCLA. And all I needed to do was have a fresh start and a good opportunity, and I would show people what I was capable of doing.
Yeah, that's very interesting to hear that. As I was just saying about the draft, you went undrafted. Chris Webber, who you just played recently in the NCAA tournament, went number 1 to Orlando before he got traded on draft day with Penny to Golden State. How closely did you actually follow the NBA draft on that day?
Well, I knew I wasn't going to get drafted, so, I think I was in the gym working out. I didn't have any workouts for any teams. I didn't have anything going on pre-draft wise for me. So I knew. I said, no one's seen me. Why would they draft me and they haven't seen me? After the draft was over, talked to my agent. He called the Washington Bullets and asked them if they were interested in me. And they said, oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, we liked them a lot. And, never saw me outside of what I just did in college. And they invited me to their rookie free agent camp. And I really, to this day, I was just brought in to be a body. I came in and was a completely different person than they had seen. Showed grit, determination, fight, athleticism, smarts, and really earned my way onto their team.
Yeah, that's great. That was my next question. Was going to ask, how did you become a member of the Bullets? So individually, probably your 2 best seasons in the league with the first 2 that you were there in Washington, averaging almost 8 points a game and 3 rebounds a game in less than 20 minutes per contest. Looking back on that first time that you were with Washington, what do you think of most?
Those were good opportunities, and the NBA is about an opportunity. If you get your opportunity on the floor, what do you do with it? I could have very easily come in 1 year and been done, if I didn't take advantage of my opportunity. I remember a conversation with Michael Adams, who was a 10-year vet on my team, great point guard. And he told me, this was probably mid-December after I had made the roster. He said, stay ready, Rook. So because these guys fall like flies around here. Literally, a week and a half later, Rex Chapman, unfortunately, dislocates his ankle. So I'm backing up Calbert Chaney as the backup 2 guard. And then not 2 more weeks after that, Calbert Chaney rolls his ankle really badly, and I'm in the starting lineup. And from there, it was just, I fully took advantage of the opportunity, and it ended up working out well for me.
I like it. Very good. Now, you scored an NBA career high of 26 points on 2 occasions whilst you were with the Bullets, according to thegreatbasketballreference.com. And in one of those games, you were 8 of 9 from the field. So clearly you took your high-scoring ability that you had in high school and when in college somewhat as well into the NBA. What did it feel like to have that on fire sort of feeling? And particularly, I guess, when you went back to high school, of course, those days, and you just lit it up from everywhere.
It's a good feeling. I mean, it's different in the pros because everyone on the court is capable of dominating a game. and is capable of contributing in a major way. So, to come in and to, put up games like that, certain guys do it every night, and you expect every night like a LeBron James or a Kevin Durant or a Steph Curry. On our team, we had guys that were averaging anywhere from, 18 points down to, 11 or 12 as starters, and I'm injected into the lineup, and, to be able to go out and to be able to, have a night like that where you score and you're on par with those guys, it feels pretty good. Obviously, I felt like I could do that a lot more. That's not what my job was. That's not what was asked of me. But on a particular night, if the minutes were there and the opportunities were there, I felt like I could do that. I could give the team that anytime.
Now, I'd love to briefly ask you about a fellow Australian that played with you on the Bullets. We mentioned him already, Andrew Gaze. During your rookie season, I think he played about 7 games in March of 94. What sort of memories do you have of having Andrew Gaze on the team, albeit for a short while?
Great shooter. It did not matter. When he came across half court, he was locked and ready. Really one of the purest, sweetest looking jump shots of any player I ever played with. Obviously, he had the legend of what he had done in Australia. And, it was a great guy, too. It was a good teammate. We only had him for a short amount of time, but he did leave an impression on me as one of the best shooters that I had ever played with.
Oh, that's great to hear. I just had to ask about that. Love Andrew Gaze. Now, a quick detour if I can. I want to just thank a great friend of the show and a former teammate of yours, Jim McIlvain, for alerting me to this. First of all, he says to pass on his hello to you. And
oh, Jim, I said hello.
I will do indeed. And he suggested that I ask you about your acting career and how you got involved with the classic movie Blue Chips in 1994. Do you mind just talking a little bit about that?
Those guys, they used to call me Hollywood because I was fortunate enough out of college. One of the UCLA boosters was an executive producer on the movie Blue Chips. So you look at the cast, there are quite a few UCLA players myself. And I had a chance to go in and read for the part that Penny Hardaway got, which was Butch McRae. They end up casting me just as myself in the movie. So I did that, and I remember, my wife and I going to see the movie in the theater, and I'm sitting down with her, and, there's a guy sitting next to me, and he's looking at the screen and looking at me and looking at the screen, and he's looking at me, and he looks back at the screen, looks at me and goes, "Man, that's you up there." And we got a good laugh out of that. But, so I had an opportunity to do that. I was also in Space Jams, but all of my scenes got cut.
All right.
But I was a principal in the movie, which was good because I still get checks from it to this day. I had a chance to do another movie called Rebound, The Legend of Earl Manigault, who was a New York City legend, one of the best players to ever come out of New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And that movie was made for HBO, and it was directed by Eric LaSalle. So I did that, and I did a ton of commercials just through relationships and friends that would always cast me in those.
Oh, great. So, yeah, you definitely had a bit of time on the silver screen and on TV as well.
Wasn't bad. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, for sure. It's great memories, no doubt, too, I'm sure. Now, following the 1996 season, the Bullets sent you, along with Rasheed Wallace, to Portland in return for Harvey Grant and Rod Strickland. How did you first react to the news of the trade?
It hurts. You kind of feel unwanted, and then you have to really step back, take a deep breath, and realize that it's truly a business, and, those things are going to happen. I think in hindsight, the Bullets would really prefer not to have made that trade, to have kept, Chris Webber, Rasheed Wallace, Juwan Howard all together for a little longer than what they did. I think Rasheed only got 2 seasons with them before he was sent off. And, Rasheed ends up, he's probably going to be a Hall of Famer after it's all said and done.
Yeah, it would have been quite interesting to see what would have happened if they had kept that nucleus together. In your first day with Portland, you made it to the playoffs for the first time in your NBA career, and you played limited minutes in a 4-game series loss to the Lakers. How did it feel to be part of a playoff team for the first time at the NBA level?
Completely different than the regular season. It's more electric. You can feel the intensity, the thickness in the air. The preparation is so intense.
Right. You
have to see it for a minimum of 4 nights. I mean, you practically eat, sleep, drink that team's playbook, and you know the playbook probably as well as their coach knows their own playbook. So There's a lot of intensity with it. You know, when you watch playoff basketball, those guys are really locked in, and it is a challenge to go out there and compete under those circumstances in that atmosphere.
After the 1997 season, you signed as a free agent with Cleveland, and barely a month into the season, I've since learned that you suffered some significant neck and shoulder problems, which led to surgery, which pretty much ruled out the rest of that season for you. How did you deal with the news that you'd probably miss the rest of the year?
Devastating. First time in my career that I had missed any significant time due to injury, and that's all the way through high school. Was one of the hardest things to comprehend, to deal with. You know, you want to go out and you want to, you know, help your team win. Mike Fratello had a lot of trust in me. I was playing, felt like this was the right environment, the right situation for me where my career could potentially take off. In the first game of the season, I'm actually shoved in the back getting ready to go up for a rebound, and a disc slips in my neck. And I lose all my tricep muscle strength over the next 4-5 weeks. So for me to make a simple chest pass across court felt like I was outside the arena trying to throw the ball into the arena. That's how much tricep muscle strength that I lost. And once we got it diagnosed, you know, the coach, you know, then understood why I had so many turnovers and was like, oh, I get it now. Had the surgery. Surgery was a 3 to 4 month recovery before I was cleared for any type of activity. By the time I was cleared for activity, the team was preparing for the playoffs. I hadn't played a game all season, so I was left off the playoff roster, but got myself ready, prepared for the following season, and I came back to Cleveland the following season and played the next season with them. Lockout shortened season.
Now, following that season, you wouldn't return to the NBA until the 2001-2002 campaign, but in between that gap in the NBA resume, you headed overseas, from what I've read, and played in Lithuania before you returned back to America and played in the American Basketball Association, but that was not part of the original ABA, I should add. What did you make of your stay in Europe, playing overseas there, and what was it like to return back to the States?
I went to camp with the Indiana Pacers. I was also offered a camp invite with the Los Angeles Lakers.
All right.
Played exceptionally well, probably better than I had at any training camp with the Indiana Pacers. I was told that I'd made that roster by the general manager. He told my agent that probably a week before the season was to begin. My contract was written up as a guarantee if I was on the roster the first day. They called me in the day before. Larry Bird says, hey, we like you a lot. We think if we release you now, someone will pick you up. I have a lot of young players that we've got to figure out minutes for. Al Harrington, Jonathan Foster, you know, guys like that. And he was like, you know, I just think that you're too good to sit on the bench. And released me, and, you know, no one was making any moves right away. So by December, I ended up signing a deal in Lithuania. Took the deal, went over to Lithuania, and I would suggest that all NBA players do at least 1 year in Europe. It's a different style of basketball. It's an atmosphere of basketball. It's more like college. You know, provinces really get behind their teams and just, you know, you have the face painting and you have, you know, the local songs. You know, it's a different type of basketball, but, you know, it isn't for the faint of heart because, you know, when you're in the NBA, you're spoiled. You've got private jets, 5-star hotels. You barely touch your luggage when you're on the road. When you're in Europe, you're pretty much doing it all yourself. So it's humbling yet fulfilling because it's basketball at its purest form.
Well, it sounds like it certainly was an adventure for you. And I did notice actually on Basketball Reference, now you mentioned it, that you were briefly listed as being on the Indiana roster, or at least with Indiana in October of 99. So, yeah, I didn't realize you were that close to making the team then, which obviously that season they went to the NBA Finals, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I couldn't have lost either way. Both were in the finals that year, and the Lakers ended up beating Indiana Finals that year. But it certainly would have been amazing.
Now, just before the 2001-2002 NBA season commenced, you rejoined Portland as a free agent. How was the return to Portland and just being back in the NBA in general?
It was good. You know, it was a much different team than the first time in Portland. The first time in Portland, we really had a lot of young guys that were unprofessional, that were all about the money and not really about the game. The second time around in Portland, you know, it was a veteran-laden team. We had Arvydas Sabonis, we had Scottie Pippen, we had Dale Davis, We had a number of guys that, David Stoudemire that put in a lot of time and were, good ball players. So, we felt good about, our team, and, it was just a whole different feel than that first time around. That first time around, it was a very young, immature team.
Yeah, right. So quite a contrast. Now, for the 2002-2003 season, you were a key member of now I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing it right. Is it Yakima Sun Kings?
Yakima.
Yeah,
yes.
Yakima Sun Kings in the Continental Basketball Association. And along with one of your former UCLA teammates, Derek Martin, you led the Kings team to the CBA championship. So what was that experience like, and how did it feel to win the title there?
I made $1,000 a month in the CBA, and we traveled on buses, and we would travel after a game. You're icing on a bus, 5-6 hour bus ride. But it was the most fun that I had had in basketball on the professional level.
Wow.
It was just raw, pure fun. Takes you back to your high school days when you're playing AAU basketball and you all pile into the van and you're driving to this location and that location playing games. We had so much fun as a group, and we were an older group. I think we were all in our late 20s, early 30s, and we were playing against a lot of young, talented ball players trying to make their way to the NBA, and we just walked them down night in and night out and end up winning a championship against Dave Yeager's team, the North Dakota Wizards, and Dave Yeager's now the head coach of the Memphis Grizzlies.
It's incredible, really, how I've spoken to numerous former players, and those that have actually spent time in the CBA talk quite highly about their experiences and how great of a time they often had playing in the CBA as opposed to NBA. So that's really interesting to hear that.
Mm-hmm. It's just different. Really, you're going back to your roots of basketball, how you played it years ago when, you were playing for free.
Definitely. Now, you've been very generous with your time, so I've just got a few more quick questions if you don't mind.
Mm-hmm.
You closed out your NBA playing career, returning to suit up for the Washington Wizards. I think you might have also been on the Denver roster perhaps prior to the following season, but did you sense that last season with Washington would be your last in the league, or did you actually want to play on further?
I did want to play on further, but when I got to Denver the following year and went through a training camp, you just know. I was 32 going on 33, and it just wasn't there. You can see a guy getting ready to make the move, and you tell your body, hey, do this. Your mind is telling you to do this, and your body just literally reacts a second to a second and a half too late. And in the NBA, that is death. Carmelo's blowing by me, Kenyon Martin's blowing by me, Andre Miller's blowing by me, Earl Boykins, Vashawn Leonard. And it just, I'm looking and I'm just saying, wow, this is crazy because, coming in to the NBA, I can remember my rookie season, I was probably the most athletic guy on my team. I'd always been one of the most athletic guys, but when it goes, it goes. And, there's that realization. My college coach, Jim Herrick, was a special consultant to the coaching staff. And I remember putting his arms around me. He looked up at me and he shook his head and he said, Butler, it just isn't there anymore. And I said, Coach, I agree. And ironically enough, they cut me and offered me a job in the same sentence, which was really strange. The coach says, hey, we're going to waive you, but we'd like to hire you as an assistant coach. It was a lot to absorb at that particular time because, I'm still thinking I can play. Go back to my room, I get a call from my agent saying that the Minnesota Timberwolves are interested in me as an assistant coach, and then the Washington Wizards called as well. Took a day or two to think about it, turned down a big offer in Turkey to go over and play there, and decided to pursue the next phase of my career.
Just one more question about your playing career. You talked about how athletic you were throughout most of your playing days, and you appeared on a number of NBA Action's top 10 players of the week and made a couple of top 10 players of the year as well. I did a quick YouTube search, and there's numerous great plays that you did that featured on the show. Do you have a favourite move or a moment from your playing days that you remember most fondly?
Probably was the move against the Houston Rockets. I was on the post. I think I might have been guarded by Vernon Maxwell.
Exactly.
And I hit the ball in the post, and I spin out, and I go up, and my intent was to try and dunk it. And Carl Herrera comes over to try to block it. And as I'm going up and I see him come over and he jumps, I hit him and spin and do a 180, and I get fouled and toss the ball over my head, a la Michael Jordan. I think he does it a little bit better, but it went in and I got the and one. So that was probably one of my favorite top 10 plays.
I love it. And you've got a great recall for what happened, because that's pretty much identical to how the play actually took place. So good memory there. Basketball Digest had a great regular feature, which was called The Game I'll Never Forget. Is there a game from your career at any level that stands out more than another?
I think that there were one on each level, and it would probably be my last game in high school. I think I had 55 points and 26 or 28 rebounds. My last game in college, I think I may have had 18 or 19 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 6 steals. My final 2 points in Pauley was a 360 slam dunk. And then on the professional level, we played San Antonio. I had a perfect game. I was 8 for 8, 6 for 6, 2 for 2 from the 3, and I finished with 24 points, but didn't miss a shot from the field.
Nice stats there, and a great way to close out your Pauley Pavilion days, if you had a 360 dunk to finish that one off. Nice one to look back on.
Yeah, that one was nice. A lot of people remember that. You know, when I do go up to Pauley and I take in a UCLA game, that's often said to me, like, "Oh, you remember that 360 dunk that you had, final game of the season against Washington?" And you know, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much for sharing your memories too. Now, you mentioned how you moved on to the next phase of your career. I believe for a season you were in a player development role before then transitioning into becoming a sports agent. As we chat today, what's your current role within basketball, Mitchell?
I'm a sports agent right now. I'm an agent at Jackson Management Group. Like you said, I've been doing it for 10 years. I've had the pleasure of working and repping Dwight Howard, Drew Holiday. I currently represent Avery Bradley, Josh Hustis, Tony Snell. I've had Jarvis Hayes, Juan Dixon, Von Wafer, Earl Watson, and I've come across a lot of other greatly talented players, worked with, you know, a number of big agents that have represented a plethora of talent.
That's excellent. And obviously you would have had an agent of some description, one shape or another, when you were a player. What do you actually think now, as you are in the role of a sports agent? What separates an agent from being good and great?
I think it's really caring. It's so easy to look at a player as a commodity. And if that commodity yields a return, you invest in it. And if it doesn't yield a return, you just toss it to the side. As someone who played the game, who coached, who worked in the front office, I have a different appreciation when I interact with my guys. I lived it. I know what they're going through. I know how important it is to hand someone your life's work and say, please manage it the proper way. That's how I approach every single one of my clients. You're handing me your life's work. You've been doing this since you were 4 or 5 years old. I owe it to you to give it that type of respect, that type of commitment, that type of hard work.
Excellent. And sounds like you definitely do have that caring nature too. So I read about that in many different articles that I found whilst researching for our chat today. So it's good to hear you've certainly backed that up and then some. Just my last question, if you don't mind. I've got an obsession of sorts with numbers and the particular significance that a player might have with their jersey numbers that they wear during their career. At Oakwood in high school, I'm pretty sure you had 23. Same thing for the Bruins. You also wore 23 with Portland, also number 6 with Portland and at Cleveland. And finally back with the Wizards again, you had 32. So what's the actual significance of those numbers, if you don't mind my asking?
Well, 23 for me on two folds. One was, obviously Michael Jordan, wearing number 23. And I think everyone loved it and everyone wanted to be like him. And that was great. But the bigger one was Psalms 23 from the Bible, basically walking in the shadow, walking without fear and just trusting where, the Lord's going to take you.
Mm-hmm.
When I wore 32 with the Washington Bullets, that number was actually issued to me because 23 was taken. So they just reversed the two numbers.
Oh, yeah.
And then when I played in Cleveland and I played in Portland, on those two occasions where 23 wasn't available, I took the number 6 because Dr. J was my favorite player growing up. And you couldn't wear 6 in high school and you couldn't wear 6 in college because when the official holds up 5 fingers in one, we're thinking either 51 or 15 instead of 6. So in the NBA, they just blurted out, foul on number 6. They toss the fingers up, and you can do it on the NBA level, but on the collegiate and high school level, at least back then, you couldn't wear the number 6. It was an illegal number.
Thank you for telling me that, because it's just a bit of a weird obsession I have with finding out if there's a significance. And obviously you do have some very strong significance in those numbers, so I appreciate you sharing that. Mitchell, it's been a real pleasure to have you on the show. I appreciate you giving me the chance to connect with you and talk about your career, and I just wish you continued success in the future, and thanks again.
Adam, appreciate it so much, buddy. Thanks for having me too.
Thanks for listening. I welcome your interaction with the show. You can suggest topics or guests you want to hear conversations with. You can leave a voicemail. Simply visit inallairness.com/voice. Click start recording, leave your message and press stop. You can even listen back before you submit. Press send and you're done. Worldwide, the show currently has 56 reviews, 53 on iTunes and 3 on Stitcher. Thanks for your continued support. If you add a review, I'd love to read it out on a future episode. Your ratings and reviews are one of the best possible ways to support the podcast. If you enjoy the show, please tell your basketball-loving friends about it. Your word-of-mouth recommendations are more than worth their weight in gold. You can subscribe to my show in various ways. iTunes, visit inallairness.com/review. Add it to your Stitcher playlist, inallairness.com/Stitcher. You can also subscribe on Pocket Casts, Player FM, TuneIn Radio, other podcatchers, and of course via the Podcasts app on your iOS device of choice. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show, and share my web address with your friends and colleagues, inallairness.com. Check out the podcast archive for plenty more episodes with high-profile guests. Follow me on Twitter @inallairness. Please add your like to the show's social hub, facebook.com/inallairness. Join me next time for another edition of the show.